Good evening. It's good to see each of you here this evening for our evening worship service. Hope you had a nice Sunday afternoon. Sunshine came out for a little bit this afternoon and made for a good day. You're going to have to give me a little grace tonight and a little patience as I go through the lesson. It's going to take a few minutes to get into the text we're going to be talking about. I think it's important to do this. And as I worked on this lesson, I got thinking a whole lot about where I got the love of words from and sort of my origin, and really sort of getting excited about biblical words and spending some time. And it really can go back to one of my professors, very first professor I had when I went to Lipscomb. And most of you know my story because you are my story. But the only reason I was at Netherland for that many years ago was somewhat of an interesting chain of events. Of course, went to church down Double Springs, and I'd preached a few times there. Brother Charles Lynn was our preacher, and I wasn't scared to get up in front of people. So when he would be out sick or not be able to be there, sometimes they'd ask me to fill in. I spoke a few times, not many times at all, really, but I spoke a few times, maybe 3 or 4 sermons down there. And just so happened, Sister Smith was visiting, and Sister Smith was from Jamestown. She was visiting her relatives, the Chaffins there, Earl, and Madge was sick at the time. But visiting Earl, and she'd heard me speak at Double Springs, and she was from Jamestown. I went to the congregation up there, and their son Dan went to church at Netherland at that time. And when y'all were looking for a preacher, she says, well, I heard this Mark Loftis preach, did an okay job, I guess. And so y'all didn't come speak up at Netherland. So I agreed to come speak one Sunday in November of 1991. And so I came and spoke that one Sunday. They didn't have anyone speak the next Sunday. Would you speak the next Sunday? And I think y'all tried out a few people. Then they called me back. Would you speak for us? And I said, well, I'll speak for you till homecoming. I'll give you 6 months. So from January to June of that year, homecoming. Well, after homecoming, still didn't have anybody. So you're stuck with me by this time. But after a while, my sweet dear wife, she always speaks the truth to me. And she says, if you're going to do this, you're going to have to get some education. And so she was one of the first ones to suggest that I probably need to get some more education. I told someone one time that, that these people really love me and they want to be their preacher. I think the very first Christmas that I had with y'all at Netherland, y'all gathered money together and you bought me a complete set of commentaries. It's like, this boy needs help. And so I still have that. That's a very cherished thing that I have, is these commentaries. So I decided to go to Lipscomb. Lipscomb had a master's program and they accepted me. And so I decided to go down there. And the very first class, because I was working full time and being here, and Dylan was a baby, but really I think it was 1993, 94. He was tiny. So I decided to go to school down there. And one thing I like is they had these week-long intensives. You can go every day for 6 days to school, and that was the term. But you were there all day long, and then you had a final exam usually to take and a paper to write. So the very first class I signed up at Lipscomb was Romans and Galatians. It was the book of Romans and Galatians. It's taught by Dr. Harvey Floyd. So I went, as any good student was prepared. I got a New King James translation, and I had my NIV translation, and I had an American Standard translation. I bought the Moo text. I think they had 2 different texts for the class. I bought everything and read those before I went to class and stuff. I was prepared. And so Dr. Harvey Floyd, an older professor, this was his very first time of teaching a week-long intensive. He'd never taught one before, which was really good for us because his wife worried about him. So she would bake cookies and bring them around the premise of bringing the students cookies, and I would bring the class to check on him and stuff. And so Dr. Floyd got up and began with the book of Romans. And I'd never heard anyone talk that way before. I'd never heard anyone with such deliberate eloquence and forethought. Every word was meaningful. And I've got my Bible out. I've got my notebook out. I'm flying through trying to take notes, trying to keep up. But I'm struggling because I can't find, I have 3 translations, and I'm not following any of the translations. I mean, the words weren't matching up, and I was wanting to follow along, And so finally that first morning we had a break. We had like a 15-minute go to the bathroom break and stuff. And so I waited. Dr. Floyd left the room. Everyone else left the room. And so I went up behind the podium to see what translation Dr. Floyd had, because I was going to get whatever translation he was reading from. And I looked at his Bible, and it was all Greek. He was translating from the Greek text as he went. He had notes and stuff like that. So I felt like, I'm in the wrong place. I don't belong here. But it was Dr. Floyd who gave me a love of biblical words, because that was the language of the Bible. And even though it comes down to his English, sometimes we're really, really benefited by going back and looking at the words as they understood the words. when they were penned, how was that word used in everyday language? So I say all that to say, please be patient with me. I am getting somewhere with biblical text tonight. But I want to talk about the word teleos. Can you say that? Just teleos? Teleos. Or teleos. Either one, teleos or teleos. Sometimes you say it both ways. But teleos. So we're going to spend some time talking about teleos, and then we're going to get the biblical text. Okay? So teleos, this form of it, you can have a verb form, a noun form, an adjective form, or even an adverb form of it. But we're going to talk about teleos, the adjective. 19 times it's used in the New Testament, in 17 verses, so it occurs twice in some verses, but 19 times it's used in the New Testament. So it's not a real common word, but your connotation to it, you would think it occurs more times than that. But this is, 19 times in the New Testament. But so it occurs pretty often. It's profound when it does occur, I believe, but it's not as common as you might think it would be. So if you want to look at a definition, it's about a direction or path towards something. Sort of in this, the finish, you've reached its term, limit, hence, complete, full, wanting and nothing. So there's a lot of shades of meaning. That was one of the words he would use. There's a lot of shades of meaning in this word. So you need to understand a little bit about maybe some of the roots of it. So to help you maybe, I took an English word, what we think is an English word, and show you sort of where this root is used at. So the idea of telephone. Telephone is actually a Greek word. Tele, okay, or tele, and phone. And so we get the word phonic and something like that. So tele is Greek for a far off, or far distance, okay? And so phone is Greek for voice. So a telephone is a mechanism to make your voice go a far distance. Make sense? Telephone. So when teleos, same prefix form there, Greek for far off, and eos is anything pertaining to something or belonging to something. So eos is just a suffix that goes with teos. So it's something that's a far off or a great distance. So maybe think of a trip that you've taken with young kids or whatever. You have a point of origin, and invariably before you get there, you hear what? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Every time that question's asked, other than maybe getting on your nerves, okay, it's a little bit more true, right? How many times that? Yeah, almost. We'll be there soon. Okay. And are we there yet? Are we there? And every time yes, you're answering truth. Yeah, we're almost there, but we're not quite there yet, right? Okay. And you say, yeah, and they begin not to trust you. Yeah, you said that, a long time ago. Okay. But every time you spoke the truth, are we there? Yeah, almost. We're almost there. Okay. Yeah, we're almost there. We're almost there. Every time you said you spoke the truth, right? You weren't being dishonest. Yes, we're almost there. Okay. So, teleos. So, from the connotation of a place from going a far distance, a place of origin to where you're going. Now, one of the things that I remember that Dr. Floyd would do, and I really wished I could remember some of the things he would use in class, but he would read not just the Bible. He would pick up other Greek texts in and around the time, ancient texts. And he would read from these texts, of course, translating as he went, to show us how these words would be used in everyday language, everyday parlance, everyday communication that people were using. He would use, and he would read these words, and he would just sort of chuckle to himself, and he had like always an inside joke, because he was smarter than everybody else in the room, I think. But he always had this like inside joke going on, because he would chuckle. This afternoon, I actually found a YouTube of Dr. Floyd, and I was listening to it, and Tammy said, who is that you're listening to? And I said, Dr. Floyd. She said, he sounds almost like a robot. And I said, well, I guess there's a little bit of that in him, but he was always have this little dry wit and chuckle going on. But he'd read these non-biblical texts to show us sort of the implication of the ancient text. So I was able to find some examples of how this teleos was used in ancient non-biblical text. And to help you understand a little bit of what the person using the word, describing the word, had in mind, I add some pictures to it. So this is one of the contexts in which teleos would be used. So the ideal of no one under 18 or reaching the age of majority, that's your point of pain. Actually, it was referred to as heirs being old enough to inherit. Okay, so they would talk about the teleos children, the children of the people who passed away or whatever, that they were now able to reach the majority. Sometimes people may write a will or a covenant that say, okay, upon my death, my kids can get their inheritance at a certain age. So teleos, those of a certain age, could reach it. They'd reached the majority. In our language, they reached 18. So that would be an example of how it would use extra biblically, not necessarily in the Bible. So this is also one. Okay, so I don't know what you think of when you see that image, but as a way to describe women, it was women who'd reached maturity. So, the ideal of mature-looking women, or women who'd reached maturity. Teleos women had reached the fullness of their maturity. So that would have been a way that they would have used it in everyday language. Someone who sort of reached a certain point of maturity, okay? And specifically, there was an example of an acacia tree, one of these biblical trees that sometimes we mention in Scripture. But the acacia tree, I think if I'm not mistaken, acacia wood was what the Ark of the Covenant was made out of, right? So the idea of an acacia tree being a fully developed acacia tree, a teleos acacia tree. Get the idea? So that's another example, another shades of meaning. And this was another one, a teleos rooster, okay, or a teleos chicken, one that was fully grown. I mean, we used to talk about fryers. It was big enough to fry, okay. The idea that one was fully developed, ready to a certain point of maturity. And this was a sort of an interesting one, a teleos candlestick, which meant that one was fully intact. Now, we think of candlesticks very often as something you stick a wax taper into, but they thought of candlesticks as being these hollow vessels on the inside that would have a place and a cup where you could stick a wick into it, and they would burn olive oil. So the ideal of a fully, almost like a fully charged flashlight with 2 fresh batteries in it, but a candlestick that was fully ready to be used. It was complete, it was ready, it was well fueled up and ready to go, but the idea of a teleos candlestick, one that was ready to burn. So those are some examples of some extra biblical ways the word was used. Now I'd like to look at some text tonight and maybe help with understanding some concepts regarding this. So the text I want to look at is right in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5:48. Now, there are some scholars who argue that this is the apex. This is the point that Jesus is getting at. This is the main theme of the text, especially when you talk about our moral conduct and the moral attitude that we need to be pursuing. So in the text, Jesus says, "Therefore you shall be perfect." That's that first word, teleos, perfect. "Just as your Father in heaven is perfect." This is one of those verses where the word occurs twice. "Therefore you shall be perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect." Now, I don't know about you, but I've never been perfect at anything. Nothing. That's just not me. Okay? I'm really good at just doing a halfway good job at stuff sometimes. I think that's my problem sometimes. I mean, I can see things other people do, and I'm in admiration of it, but I'm pretty much realizing that's not me. I can't do that. So as Jesus is asking for us to have a certain amount of perfection as we traditionally think about the word, this is not very motivating for some of us because we realize we're going to fall far, far, far short of this. So I felt that perhaps spending some time tonight just contemplating this word teleos and all the different shades of meaning, all the ways it could be applied, and all the ways that maybe we need to fully embrace in our concept of what Jesus is saying here. "Therefore you shall be perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect." So this is a charge that we sort of have from Jesus. This is a command that He has that's striving for this. And so if you're like me, you ask the question, how can I be teleos? In my traditional thinking of the word teleos, how can I be that? And what does that look like? But understanding when we looked at all those different other ways of looking at it, it could mean a distance to go. It's a place in which you're going, a path. It's a point of development, but it's not necessarily something that we can fully obtain. So what does that look like? We ask ourselves, if the word itself means something about distance, a destination, a place to go, then I think it's fair to ask myself, what path am I on? In what direction I'm headed? I think sometimes the Bible does a great job interpreting itself if we spend some time with it. And so I looked in Scripture and found the very first person this word was attributed to. The very first person in the Bible that this word was attributed to, that he was said to be perfect. You know who it was? Noah, exactly right. Genesis chapter 6, verse 9. This is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations, Noah walked with God. Now remember, this was actually Hebrew text that had been later translated into Greek text. Okay? But here we have the concept of Noah being a just man, perfect in his generation, and Noah walked with God. I think this is a really good way of looking at what Jesus is maybe pushing us toward in Matthew chapter 5:48. The teleos he's looking for in us is what was with Noah. He distinguished himself amongst his generation. He was different than everybody else that he was around. Remember, though, what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5. We are to be salt and light, right? We're supposed to be different than everyone else. So the ideal of teleos is that you've made yourself an exception by the path you're walking and who you're pursuing and who you're following after. Noah was a perfect man. But Moses didn't stop there with his commentary about him. He said he walked with God. So we begin looking at this, that teleos can represent something that's an absolute truth. God is teleos, right? God is perfect, without flaw, without blemish. God is perfect, but also teleos can mean relative. Relative to everyone else of Noah's generation, he was teleos. But relative to God, he wasn't perfect, was he? Only God alone is perfect. And so we begin looking at it in this context. We begin putting the pieces of the puzzle together. Maybe you work jigsaw puzzles. Some people may like to work those. And as you spend time working and you keep looking for the pieces and looking for the pieces. So understanding teleos is somewhat like that. There's a lot of pieces that go together to put the whole picture together. So teleos can be absolute. God is teleos. He is perfect. But also man can be teleos relative to others, right? That's what Noah was. Was Noah complete without flaw? No. He pulled a big drunk after the flood. He did. He wasn't perfect. Not as in God is. But relational to others. When Jesus calls us to be salt and light, He doesn't minimize the very fact that we're going to be struggling with our own identity sometimes and we're going to fail in being Christ-like. But in relative to everyone else, yes, we can be teleos. So I guess part of the answer to the question, how can I be teleos, is answering this question. Am I moving in a direction towards God? Jesus challenges His followers to be in the path of following God, to be teleos, to be pursuers of God, to look for God. Therefore you shall be perfect, relative perfection, just as your Father in heaven is perfect, absolute perfection. Just what we saw in Noah. Noah was perfect in his generation because he followed a perfect God. He walked with God. So as you begin thinking, how can I pursue this? Am I moving in the direction towards God? And that's what Jesus is calling His followers to do, to begin following a relational identity, to understand who you are. You are blessed. You are salt. You are light. Now here's what salt and light lives like. These are, as John shared with us this morning, an eloquent lesson on anger. This is how you deal with your emotions. This is how you deal with your relationships. There are certain things that are more important to me than worship. I want you to have the right kind of relation with God and with man. Spend your energy here. Make these things matter. So Noah was a just man, perfect relative to his generation, right? And Noah walked with God, absolute perfection. Teleos. Shades of meaning of the same words. Teleos is a process, a journey, a path, a destination, not an event. It's not an event. There's not going to be a day you're going to look in the mirror and say, I'm perfect. What was the Mac Davis song? Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble. When you're perfect in every way. I can't wait to look in the mirror. I get better looking each day. Now some of you, that may be your theme song. Okay? You may be on your cell phone or whatever. But the reality is, you're not going to wake up one day and say, I'm perfect. And if you're waiting for that moment to happen, I don't know if you're ever fully going to experience God's grace and mercy in this life. To fully put your faith and trust in God. It's a challenge for us. Teleos, it's a process. It's a journey. It's a destination. It's about who you're walking with. Are you walking with God? Are you following the steps of Jesus? Are you with His disciples or are you not? That's what it means to be teleos. It's a process, a journey, a path. It's a far way to go. Teleos, over there somewhere. But am I heading in that right direction? How will I know I'm heading in the right direction? Well, it's what John talked about this morning. It's about your anger. What are you doing with your anger? How are you doing with it? Well, very good, thank you. You get rid of it all the time. That's not what he meant. There's going to be some difficult ethical things that Jesus is talking about in the Sermon on the Mount. John and I, we're talking about some of these hard lessons that we're going to be delivering. It's hard stuff relating to your enemies, turning the cheek, going the extra mile with someone that you have an obligation to, but you go even further than the obligation. Teleos. It's a process. It's a journey. So perfection is not something I'm going to grab hold of. So Jesus said in Matthew chapter 19, verse 21, this is one of the other occasions that happens in Scripture. And you're familiar with the story. The rich young ruler says to Jesus, what do I need to do to inherit eternal life? Jesus says, well, you need to obey the law, the commandments. He says, I've got that stuff licked. I've been doing it since I was a kid. And Jesus says, well, if you want to be perfect, go, sell what you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasures in heaven. Come and follow me. You want to be teleos? You want to continue the journey to righteousness, to right standing before God? Teleos. Be teleos. Divest yourself. If the young man had went out and sold everything he had that day and gave it to the poor, guess what? Jesus said, that's not enough. That's not enough. I'm not talking about emptying your bank account. I'm talking about you following me. We sometimes stop with, that'd be a hard thing to start everything you got and give to the poor. That was just half the invitation. Teleos was continuing to walk with him, continue to go as far as he would go. Walk with him. Follow him. It's over there somewhere. It's never here. It's always over there. Why? Because we're relative. God's absolute. It's over there, not here. But I need to make a really important point. Teleos is not a condition of God's love for us. Teleos is not a condition of God's love for us. I'm going to tell you why. Because of what Mark said about the young man that came and asked Jesus about being his disciple. You know what Mark said about him in Mark's account? Mark 10:21. Then Jesus, looking at him, loved him. Was this man teleos? No. Not there yet. But Jesus loved him. And if you think tonight you've got to get perfect before God loves you, no. It doesn't work that way. That would be earning His love. And God loved us while we were still yet sinners. Paul says Christ died for us. So Jesus loved him, but He wasn't teleos. He wasn't perfect. God's not some petulant father who receives and rejects and receives and rejects and receives and rejects. John used an illustration this morning. God's not angry if you don't have a good report card. I love you. I love you. Teleos is not a condition of God's love. It's not. Teleos is about the direction you are going, not in a state of being. Are you walking with God? Are you following Christ's example? Are you walking in the light? Are you following and pursuing God? That is teleos. Teleos. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 1, Paul writes, just as He chose us in Him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and without blame before Him love. This is a dimension of teleos, this holiness. Also, in 1 Peter chapter 1, 15 through 16, but as He who called you is holy, you also be holy in your conduct, because it's written, be holy for I am holy. This is also a process of teleos. Being holy. Now, holiness is something, again, that is relative versus absolute. God is absolutely holy. When John gets to see the veil of heaven thrown back, that's what they're saying. Holy, holy, holy. Now, when we distinguish ourselves by our moral conduct and our relational attitude and what we see in the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus is bringing about, we obtain process toward holiness. But we're never completely holy. We struggle. But when we work toward holiness, teleos, in direction of, going toward, we're really moving in the direction that God would have us be. So teleos is aspirational. It's what we aspire to. It's not something that we obtain. The very moment you think you are, you're not. The very moment you think you're perfect, you're not. Remember, Jesus said, there are these two men praying. And one guy's praying out in the open with his hands toward heaven saying, God, you are so blessed to have someone like me. I know that you just smile every day when you look at me. I'm just so wonderful. I'm so holy. I'm so righteous. I thank God that you've got me. I'm so thankful I'm not like this publican over here. And Jesus said the publican wouldn't even lift his eyes toward heaven, but beat on his chest and said, God, be merciful on me, a sinner. And Jesus said that man went down to his house justified. God said he was right. He didn't transform him into this supernatural holy being. God said, this man here is going in the right direction. This man here is not. Teleos. It's aspirational. Romans chapter 12, verse 1, again, to point to the aspirational aspect of it. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed in the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable, perfect will of God. Transformation. This is the context where we get the word metamorphosis, that changing from one form to another. Metamorpho, to change, transform, metamorphosis. We're in the constant shape and change toward holiness. Philippians chapter 3, verse 12. Paul again talking about the aspirational aspect of teleos, to be perfect. Not that I've already attained or I'm already perfected, but I press on. This is the verb form of that word. That I may lay hold of that which Christ Jesus also laid hold of for me. Paul says, listen, folks, I ain't got there yet. I'm not there yet, but I'm moving in the direction of it. Teleos. I'm pursuing it. I'm walking with God. I'm following the footsteps of Jesus. That's what it means. God never meant for teleos, perfect, if you will, to become a reason or excuse for stagnation. There's something within the human spirit, and you've seen it play out, maybe in your own life, maybe in the life of others, is someone has a tyrannical expectation of perfection. You must be perfect. You must do this perfectly. You must do that perfectly. And if you can't do it perfectly, something bad's going to happen or you're defective. One of the two. You ever seen that? One of the best words of advice I got as a young child was from my sister Judy, Casey's mom, John's mother-in-law. So we were having a coloring contest in first grade. Okay. And I wanted to win the coloring contest because the people who won the coloring contest are going to choose, I think, 2 or 3 students from each class, and they got to go on a field trip. Okay. And I wanted to win the coloring contest. And I was telling Judy about the coloring contest. And we were coloring little sheets of occupations. You know, the people doing different jobs and stuff like that. And I just so wanted to win the coloring contest. Okay. But everyone knew that Kim Anderson was the best colorer because she told you she was the best colorer. Okay. She would always sort of draw heavy lines around the outside and color the inside. And she had just a way of shade. And obviously it was good. Kim was a good colorer. But I won the coloring contest, you know. And Judy says, don't worry, if you get outside the lines, just fill that in. And of course, I couldn't walk and chew gum at the same time. Okay. So I remember taking some artistic liberties with some of the drawings. You know, I added little things because I got outside the line, you know. So they were a little bit misshapen, but they showed some imagination. And when the winners of the coloring contest came in, guess who won? Well, Kim did. But I did. And they took us to Dairy Queen for lunch that day, and we went to the fire department, we went to the police department, but I won with these great words of advice. You don't have to be perfect. Just do your best. Get outside the line a bit, just fill that in and go on. Great words of wisdom. But some people are immobilized, are afraid they're going to mess up and not be perfect. People says, well, I can't do this as well as somebody else, so I'm not going to try. God never wanted this to be an excuse for stagnation. God never wanted this teleos to become an excuse for not trying. But in our ways of thinking, we sometimes use this as an excuse. James chapter 4, verses 3-4 talks about this developmental process or faith. The one that testing your faith produces patience, but let patience have its, what's that word again? Teleos. Perfect work. That you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. That's the other verse that's got it twice. That it's a process. You're not going to get there overnight. It's a destination you're going in. It's what direction am I heading? Am I walking with God as Noah did? Am I different than everyone else around me? Am I salt in my life? Am I being what Jesus has called me to be? Am I taking His moral code of conduct and applying it in my life? Am I teleos? We must be very careful and never let perfect be the enemy of the good. If you wait till you can execute something perfectly, you may never do it. Because guess what? You won't be. You won't be. I'm not musically inclined, and you've heard me sing, and you say amen. But some of you can play instruments. Now, I got somewhat inspirational one time. My barber down in Bloomington Springs decided he was going to teach music lessons and cut hair. Okay, so my barber, was going to give music lessons in the evenings and cut hair during the day. So I got me a guitar, and I was going to play guitar. Tammy and I were dating. I was a kid. I was a young man. And like that. And here's how my barber described my guitar playing. He said he sounds like a dying calf in a hailstorm. That was not very inspirational. And his music shop didn't stay open very long, okay? But it wasn't very inspirational. But those of you who play instruments realize it don't sound too good. It's not good. But if you let perfect be the enemy of the good, guess what? You never try. You never do it. And I think sometimes when we take perfect and make it mean something it didn't necessarily mean, it didn't mean what we think it means sometimes in the ear of the first person and the person in the first century. It didn't mean what we say it meant sometimes with Jesus. That it meant something that was unflawed and something was absolute. No, it's relative to who God is, but in the direction of God. So as we look at Matthew chapter 5, verse 48, therefore ye shall be perfect just as your Father in heaven is perfect. Maybe when you read that in the future, you'll think something different than what you thought in the past. It's not about being without flaw. It's not about being never messing up. It's not about being all that. It means that you're going in the right direction. God's absolute, and I'm moving toward the absolute. In all my ways of relating, in all my ways of being. But I'm going to fail and stumble along the way. That's why Christ's grace is sufficient. Because I can't do it myself. But it's moving in the right direction. Ye shall be perfect. Because you're following the one who is. Not because you are. If you're here tonight and we can assist you, we'd love to spend some time with you and love on you, encourage you. If you'd like to confess you as your Savior, bear with Him in baptism, man, we have everything ready. We're always ready for that. Austin's going to lead us in a song. Won't you come as we sing the song?